Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Just taking the L's to start today, honestly. Apologize for being a little bit late today. StreamYard is the program we use to broadcast the show. And they've made some new updates, which have been great, actually. Like, overall, I'm very pleased. But one of the updates that they've made that I don't know if I love so much is that it does not really play nice with my camera anymore. So you're going to get pixelated T-Frank unless I try to fix that. So long way of saying technical difficulties why we're a couple of minutes late today. So apologize for that. But welcome to the show. We've got the full cast and crew today. Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz on location today. So welcome to the show. Anything happened for you guys yesterday? Anything going on, Fitz?
No, nothing. I can't think of anything. And Ryan, did you cover anything?
I raked a bunch of Little League fields in the rain. That was fun. But yeah, no other than that.
How's that work? Do you have to throw the drying stuff on, or are you just raking it and then
yes.
Oh boy.
Lots of quick dry, as half the bag is now on my shoes. So only I don't know, another week ago this tournament. So
dry shoes.
It's fine.
Good for you.
Yes, so, Roseby Lubintus. Is that what you were referring to, T-Frank, I assume?
Oh, well, I got to play the graphic. Yeah, actually, absolutely. Penn State recruiting news for 2026, not over in July, as we found out last night. Penn State offensive lineman Roseby Lubintus, as Ryan just mentioned, flipped from Penn State to Syracuse. So that's obviously the news of today. That's going to be what we talk about here on the show for a good bit to start things off. Fitz, lead us off. Take us through how this happens and what Lubintus had to say to On3 about the reason for his flip.
I thought Lubintus' comments to Steve Wiltfong were very interesting. You look at the stuff that he said following that decision, and first and foremost, Penn State didn't dump him. I mean, if anybody's reporting that's false. Penn State was content keeping him on board. I mean, I don't think this was a situation where it was a back and forth firefight or anything like that, but Penn State did want to keep him in the class. They had 5 offensive linemen. They're back down to 4. This is part of this new reality when you're talking about recruiting, and you see where Roseby Lubintus was in Penn State's class. He was the bottom ranked guy in Penn State's class among non-kickers, basically. So you have found throughout this cycle that there are varying levels in the hierarchy of the value of prospects in the class. You think back to Rutgers getting YD Collier and Elias Koch. Those are the two that kind of jump out at you. So regional programs like a Rutgers, like a Syracuse, are going to place a higher onus on, what they deem as guys higher in the slotting of their class. We talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. Where you slot in this, or where you sort of are valued from a monetary standpoint in this class, is going to be a lot figured around where you slot into your class, your roster, your eventual roster, and how that works. So Rutgers' number 1 DN might be Penn State's number 3 DN, which is, realistic in what we're talking about with YD Collier. So I think that there's a value there for Syracuse to get to flip a prospect from Penn State. That is very interesting from a headline standpoint. It's very in line with what Fran Brown has done. And it's very it encapsulates what we're looking at right now with recruitment, because it used to be that you would get when you got your guys sniped, it would be top guys. It would be the guys that everybody wanted. Now it's everybody in your class. You got to play defense for everybody. So I think you see that with Lubintus. Obviously, nothing changes on the evaluation here. A project from the get-go, 3-4 years from playing. But a guy that, in a world where I sound like the movie, the movie.
In a world where everyone reaches their full potential, Roseby Lubintus had really sky high potential. Yep,
doesn't always work that way. I think T-Frank, I've probably been the most critical of this. I know he's kind of grown on you through camp season, but it was going to be a long ride for him. 6'6", 350 does not grow on trees, but at the same time, conditioning, all that kind of stuff plays into it. So I think it's just a very interesting snapshot into modern day recruiting on where that fits. And Lubintus seems pretty happy with Syracuse. I started out by talking about what he told Steve Wiltfong in the story, and then I completely neglected that stuff. So I apologize for that. But a lot of doubt sown in going to Penn State and being, as I said, the lowest ranked guy in Penn State's class, whereas going to Syracuse, he would be a headliner. That is a pitch that came from Syracuse. This is not I did not get. I left my decoder ring at home, and I'm not there right now. That is a pitch from Syracuse to say that you are more valued in this class than you are at Penn State, and that's what he went for.
Ryan, what's your perspective on the situation?
Yeah, he's the 8th ranked player in Syracuse's class out of 27, by the way. So that says something where those two are at the moment. And Sean obviously hit on the big points there. He was always going to be a project player. I think a couple of things. I mean, one, they offered him before he even was a full-time starter at Timber Creek, largely based on his frame. He had good shot put numbers, things like that they always look for, right? And that made a lot of sense. Penn State stayed on him well. Obviously got the commitment in April. I think camp season showed us what we thought he was. I mean, Sean, you went out to the Under Armour camp in May. It was a struggle for him at times at that camp. Came to Penn State multiple times. You saw the ability or the potential, I guess you could say, of, if he drops from 350 to say 320-ish, right? And on muscle over the coming years. I mean, I've said this before, it's not an apples and apples comparison, but like in an ideal world, if everything went perfect for him, the potential for him was to be a lesser Malachi Goodman, right? He's not as developed as Malachi Goodman, but the frame, and if you got him in a strength program, could he become something more similar to that? Malachi's obviously way more developed physically and is a better prospect without a doubt from a technique perspective and all those things at the moment. But every class is different. You only have so many guys in your region. Of course, Penn State tries to recruit national as much as they can. That's not easy to do, especially at offensive tackle, defensive tackle, those premium positions that, only have so many 6'6", 350-pound linemen running across the country. So it hurts from that perspective excuse me, let me clarify. It hurts from the perspective now in my thoughts of there's not a whole lot out there that they can do. There's not a whole lot they can do really anytime soon. With this new recruiting period, we're going to get into a little bit. Like there's no more July weekend period where, they had 7 days where guys can come up. We saw Jackson Smollett, for example, come up camped late in the year. That's how we got it offer. They found ways for that 7-day July period to fill holes when things like this happen. That's not around anymore. So they can't work 2 weeks now and find some guy who's committed to Boston College or NC State or somewhere like that always have potential. Now let's get them up to camp and let's see where things go. Now you're in a situation where you have 11 weeks until the Oregon game. That's going to obviously be the premier recruiting weekend of the season. Do they chip away at some talented players that maybe down south wouldn't really normally want to visit? But hey, dude, this is looking like the premier game of the weekend. Can you get them up there? That's me, that's the earliest where we could maybe see some things start moving here. But that's where, losing out on Grayson McHugh and Marky Walbridge and all those guys, that's where this even magnifies a little bit more because you did miss those.
Yes, that's, I think, my larger point talking about Roseby Lubintus and talking about this particular class is that it's more his fit and context in what happened in 2026 as opposed to the individual talent of Roseby Lubintus. You mentioned Malachi Goodman. I think another fair comparison would be Anthony Donko. Let's not get too crazy. Like that's a little bit offensive.
No. I mean, this is a lottery ticket, right? That's what those guys were.
But there were fundamental structural issues with Malik McNeil's ability to like bend and move. Roseby Lubintus is overweight.
Same with Roseby though.
But he's over okay. So this is my interpretation of what I've seen from him on film. He's overweight, and that affects his movement skills. There are some bend issues, sure, but to me, like if you drop that weight, his feet are actually fairly quick. Seeing him in person, watching those things, that would improve with less weight. Mm-hmm. So is he the most agile player? No, but there is upside. There's growth potential with Roseby Lubintus from that particular side. You look at the size comparison, you look at the length, all those things. It's a long shot for a guy like Roseby Lubintus. Every lottery ticket doesn't have the same odds, is what I've been saying. But when you look at this class, I don't see guys that have a ton of upside. I see a lot of guys that are solid.
Kevin Brown.
Hold on 1 second.
Way of saying
I feel like I've been saying that.
He stepped into it. Yeah, he stepped in
obvious
on the board
context
last night, and now
Kevin Brown.
He's backtracking here.
The obvious context is Kevin Brown.
Right.
And again, at the same time, we've had the conversation, in an ideal world, you would have the option to play him where he is best. Center, guard, tackle, wherever that is. They do not have that in this class now. Like, in my opinion, the view of this class is they've got a couple of guys that could play tackle, but I'm not comfortable watching them athletically perform that they're surefire tackles. Lubintus was a guy that had the upside to play tackle if things worked out. They don't have that now, in the context of they also missed on Grayson McHugh and Marky Walbridge and the other kid from North Carolina that I thought was super athletic. If they had gotten one of those guys, Roseby Lubintus it's a side conversation. But because of the way this has worked out, it's not a side conversation. It was very much a need in this particular class. And of course, the context being they have a roster full of tackles right now. But is this modern college football or not? Do you have the transfer portal or not? Can things change on a dime? You don't build a lead by giving up a lap. And so, like, the overall context of this particular decommitment, I think, is emphasized by what happened in June as opposed to the individual player and recruiting itself. So, sorry. Gotcha. You got the full-on rant there. Yeah, that was like an offline rant that Zoe gets, by the way.
Poor girl. Yeah, I agree with that. I think when you look at this, you're probably still more. I'm probably still more focused on the individual, because you say, in this class you don't have the combinations or whatever to do that. You're never going to build a class from one class, or you're never going to build an offensive line from one class. So I look at the pieces that they have, and I'm still pretty comfortable with the way that this has all come together. I think that it's eye-opening when you look at this class as a whole and see, when we were talking in May about canceling guys' visits because there were too many guys on the board. There were too many, and Lubintus had just committed. You always felt good about Marlon Bright. How would you fill out those last two spots? And now all of a sudden you find yourself in this situation. I think I don't want to call it the new normal, but it's the new era of this recruiting, where you have to be on guard for all these guys. So I think that's probably the big storyline here is how do you build a complete class while focusing a lot of your energy on the top, which we admitted they absolutely have to do, and they struck out with this summer. Yeah. How do you do that while maintaining everything else with essentially programs nipping at your heels, like regional programs nipping at your heels? And I think that's where I would go with this before I would go to the Lubintus thing. I agree. I mean, it sounds like we're kind of, clowning on him, but like, if he reaches his potential again in a world where, all that happens, that is certainly possible, that he can be a really good player. From what I saw at camp this summer, he's very raw, and the conditioning is probably what scared me the most. I mean, it was eye-opening, especially you guys weren't in Under Armour, and that was a situation where he got tired. He got there late, so he missed some of the agility stuff in the first part, and then he was doing one-on-ones, and he was struggling not just with blocking, not just with standing there and blocking, but also snap count, with just like understanding where guys were coming from in one-on-one drills. And it was not pretty. It was, I think I texted the Michael Scott gif, that whole thing to Ryan during that, because it was not pretty, but we knew that was the case. We knew this was a guy that was going to take years to develop, and we knew the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow was very different than what we've seen over the last couple of months. Potentially. If you're playing a drinking game with the word potential, T. Frank, you should have put that in the title. Take a drink every time someone says potential, and you're there. A little too early for a Thursday morning.
10:18, you would already have like, hey, get me an Uber to the hospital. My stomach might need to be pumped soon. That's for sure. Ryan, anything you want to add here to this? Like, after all of that,
they do have Jack Fuchs. Let's not overlook him too. I mean, he is a true offensive tackle. So
I'm scared to mention him because I'm afraid I'm going to mess up his name. So
Fuchs like books.
Fuchs like books. Yep.
So let's talk about something a little less charged. Let's talk about some beer, Fitz. Tell me about the Happy Valley Brewers Fest, which is coming up next weekend. I know Arts Fest starts today, but the party in Happy Valley does not end during the summer. And next weekend, great reason to come back if you're already in town or if you're thinking about coming.
9 days away from the Happy Valley Brewers Fest. Excited. July 19th, coming back out to the Porter North lot by Medler Field, of course, right beside Beaver Stadium. So drink in the I know that everyone here that does partake enjoys drinking in the shadows of Beaver Stadium before football games. Well, you get to do it in July this time. So come on out, check it out. Some of the best brewers from Pennsylvania and beyond will be in State College that day. Of course, the general admission ticket gets you in from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock. The VIP gets you an extra hour. And, it's that extra hour that's when you put in the work for the really good stuff. So come on out to this weekend. Buy your tickets now if you haven't done so already. We appreciate their support, but we also appreciate putting this out there because we love to have people in State College. We love the State College economy. We love the local folks. So it's a great opportunity to get everyone together, to talk beer, to drink beer, and to celebrate beer and celebrate people. So check it out on HappyValleyBrewersFest.com. Get those tickets today.
Yeah, appreciate them being a sponsor of the show. And by the way, if you do go, make sure you tell them you heard about it here on the BWI live show. Always helps us out when, that's you can prove, hey, people heard about it and people did people like the show. And because of that, they trust us to point them in the right direction. And I'm very confident that if you go, you're going to have a great time. Because, by the way, if you're having, and this is not a doctor's advice, if you're not having a great time, have another sip and reevaluate. Today's show also is brought to you by, let's try not to make that sound alcoholic. Today's show is brought to you by, I'm off the rails, man. Brought to you by Andy Ludicky and My Perfect Franchise. Ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Maybe you want a side hustle. Maybe you're trying to pay off debt. Maybe you're trying to do something to expand your life and get control of your finances, which means get control of your future. Andy Ludicky is a franchise consultant with extensive experience doing this himself. And because of that, he's taken that knowledge and helped other people buy into franchises. Means you're buying a business that you run yourself, but you're part of a corporate structure where there's other, there's support, there's things like that. There's already an established business model. If you've got experience in a particular industry, whether it's Andy's really big into construction and the trades and things like that. He owns a dumpster company. So this isn't just for fancy highfalutin people with a business degree. Like if you understand construction or you understand a certain part of the economy and you have the money and the time and you want to make that change, absolutely give him a call. Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, 404-973-9901. Another thing you can do is you can buy a local business, and he can help you out with that with his new consulting business, which is separate from My Perfect Franchise. He can help you go through the books, understand what you're looking at, and decide if that's a good decision for you or not. So he's here to help you with business stuff, as I would, in my expert jargon, put it. Give him a call one more time. Give you that, put it up here on the show again. If you're listening on the podcast, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net is the website, 404-973-9901. Also want to say, if you're going to Arts Fest, maybe you should check out some of the local people, support the local economy. I know a friend of the show, Rothrock Wood Project, is going to be over there. I asked him the other day. Give me 1 second. I'll get it to you later. I'll tell you where he is at Arts Fest on which road, because you should go say hi. Even if you just want to look at stuff, his stuff is awesome. So appreciate everyone who's been here on a sponsor of the show. So let's talk about the upcoming class of 2027, because that's on the other side of this. We're exiting 2026, even though that news is obviously not done until they sign, until they get on campus. But there is the other half of this, which is the class of 2027 is coming into full view now. Let's get into some of the names that we need to know. Let's get into some of the players that Ryan has spoken to recently in last couple of days as we transition our perspective towards that next recruiting cycle. And I think that there's probably no other place to start than Keemon Spell, Ryan, a guy who's one of the top 15 recruits in the country. I think he's number 12 overall and already a Penn State commit. So I know that causes people to get a little nervous when you got guys that are in that 5-star range. So what was your conversation like with him recently?
Well, all three of Penn State's commits are currently in 5-star range, because even Von Brandt's 32 in the country, and Khalil Taylor right now is number 18. Obviously, long way to go, but right now they stack up well. With Spell out of those three is, I feel like, the one who certainly has the best opportunity of ending up a 5-star. And with that comes other teams pressuring, and that's the big takeaway, I think, of our write-up on him yesterday. And this shouldn't be a surprise. June 15th marks the first date that coaches can contact 2027 players. And as I think most of you should expect, a lot of schools have done that with Spell. Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee were a few notables that he mentioned. I think Louisville is another one. But, look, he's also visited Penn State 4 times this year, 9 times total. He's taken 1 visit elsewhere, and that really is I'd call it a half a visit, and it's UCLA. And he plays 7-on-7 with a team called Cal Power because they were out there, as schools often do. Penn State is one of them. Whenever they can get talented 7-on-7 teams to bring a bunch of talented players on campus, they're going to do that. I believe Masai Mickens did the same thing, when he was with Cal Power's team a year or so ago. So, we'll see if that ever ends up being a thing. I would look more so towards the Ohio State, Michigans of the world as the schools that would maybe be able to get him on campus this fall. At the same time, like I said, other than that, he has not gone to any of those schools, and that's a positive thing. He's an in-state recruit. In-state recruits and really local guys. What do we always say, Sean? The closer they are to state college, usually the better their opportunity is of keeping those guys on board. So you have to feel good about that, obviously long term. But this is a special prospect, man. He split. This is a guy who had 1,500 or I think it was just under 1,800 yards all-purpose last year. Now, granted, they do run a wing T, or we'll call it an option offense, but he was splitting carries with 2 guys who were going to play in college, probably more Division II. But the point is, he was, the sophomore behind 2 seniors, and still 1,800 yards of offense is very impressive. So now he's going to get the opportunity to get a little bit more of the bulk. Obviously, they're going to have young guys coming up to take care of some of those reps, but it's going to be an exciting year for Kevon Spell. He's already the number 1 running back in the country, and now he has the opportunity to really excite and put up some gaudy numbers this year.
If it's jump in here.
I mean, Ryan sounds almost as high energy as you talking about Kevon Spell. He's so great. He had 1,800 yards, and he's one of the best players in the country. Anyway, I'm sorry. It was just from window to window. It's very
that's why
the
I'm
energy.
Drinking Celsius, trying to wake up.
You shocking that thing. Well, I can't tell you that because you listen when I tell you that. Yes, Kevon Spell's really freaking good, and that's going to cause other teams to get in there. Notre Dame's going to be one of those teams as well. Ryan, I'm not sure you mentioned them or not, but Jaywan Snyder's obviously there.
Yes, I should have.
What is interesting to me, and we talked about this on the board in response to your article, is someone said, well, what happens when Ohio State comes in and offers them a ton of money? Well, Ohio State obviously has a great budget. No doubt about it. More money than most programs. But they also have a similar approach to Penn State. And you look at the Luke Wafel recruitment, and I think that's the thing to be more scared about with Spell. And he's given no indication that he's looking that way. But the teams that will, I don't have a better term, buy him away are not Ohio State, not the top, it's not going to be the top program.
It's not really Notre Dame or Michigan either. They have some.
Notre Dame's been spending, but at the same time, it's not.
And so is Michigan.
Notre Dame still has a lot of general attractiveness outside of the money stuff. And
can I ask a qualifier? Is it like a modest bump above what Penn State does, or is it in the same ballpark where it should be down to they're winning these recruitments because the player is choosing that school, and it's kind of 6 of one, 6.5 of a dozen of another?
No, I think it's more, but I don't think it's it's not. I mean, we're just talking about different stratospheres with USC and Oregon, Miami, Texas A&M, those schools that you look at. But you also look at all those schools, and maybe Oregon's on the outside of that looking in, but all those schools are scrambling to get where they want to be.
Yeah.
And have to pass programs in order to do it. Ohio State doesn't have to do it. Notre Dame is independent. They don't have to do it. Michigan just won a national championship a couple years ago. So there's very different levels in the hierarchy of where that's at. So USC is going to have to spend a lot to bring that in, and they've committed to doing it. I mean, it's not, I'm going to say
they have multiple $1 million players in their class.
Right. I don't know how that's going to be sustainable, but at the same time, not my money, and it's not my model. So we will see how that works out. And there's really not much you can say from 2,500 miles away on that. So when you're looking at a situation like Spell, which everyone's going to be interested, it's going to be essentially a sliding scale of how much. I don't want to say how much you want to win, but how much that program that hasn't won consistently, like a USC that won 8 games last year, how much are they going to have? How much more are they going to have to pay than Ohio State? That's going to be what's interesting. Now, I'm going to circle back around because it's worth repeating that Spell has not indicated that that's the case whatsoever. Yeah. I'm just looking at this big picture of where we're looking at with recruiting right now. So I think that's something you're going to have to continue to be aware of. Again, he's a top 15, top 20 player, number one running back in the country. So like the door is going to be worn out from knocking from people working on it. And Spell, I mean, let's be honest here, it would not be to his benefit to cut off all ties, right? Like you have to keep your options open. Not so much like if we're not talking about Franklin getting fired or something like that. We're talking about like if an offer comes through that you can't refuse, you can't refuse it. So,
right.
I mean,
right. Yeah.
Theoretically can't refuse it. So that's just where I'm at with that. But I still feel strong about his pledge. He's been up to Penn State many times. Khalil Taylor's been up to Penn State many times. Khalil Taylor's been strong in his as well. So and Von Brandt's on campus all the time. So like the start in 27 is good. How they bridge this gap between, yes, you've got the early commitments from 3 great prospects to getting more guys like that on board before the rush next season or the next summer or next spring or whatever it's going to be. Because I think that's when Penn State's going to have to do most of its work.
So let's talk about the other running back to know in 2027, and we'll kind of dig into some of that, what Fitz previewed there just now in a little bit, because I do think that is something that we're going to that Penn State fans want to know the most about, which is what's the plan to make sure 26 doesn't happen again. But some of these guys that are interested in Penn State, let's introduce those players so we know what kind of the names we're working with. And Ryan, you also talked to Isaiah Rogers recently, I believe. Really good looking guy. Just as an aside, he came to camp and I said, "Hey, is that Keemon Spell in the wrong colored jersey?" Like physically very impressive kid. What did you learn about Isaiah Rogers when you talked to him?
Good start for Penn State. It's honestly my biggest takeaways from talking to Rogers and Keemon is they're both curious about 2 running back classes, which was interesting to me because that's not usually too much of a thing. You know, we see that with quarterback more than running back. And that was kind of the interesting thing with me where, you know, how much do those 2 both want to sign up for that to be a potential opportunity? Now, Rogers is going to have opportunities from a ton of other schools. It's a long way to go. They only offered him, I believe it was end of May, early June, after a really good camp at Under Armour, which Sean attended, I believe he was at New Jersey. But, you know, he's put up consistent numbers as far as metrics. We don't really have stats on him. I've been trying to track those down, but even Rogers was like, I honestly couldn't tell you a whole lot. But just from a 40 perspective, hundreds meters, all those kind of things, really good looking player with great size as well. So it's not surprising that Stan Drayton would be, you know, very interested in him. You know, they also had Andrew Beard come up on campus this spring, who actually has pretty strong ties to Central Pennsylvania too. He's from Georgia. So just another name to throw out there. But Rogers would certainly is the one to circle as far as a, you know, regional guy. He's from Massachusetts. Springfield Central's a school that we would have to keep a close eye on. So the other thing I didn't add with Spell too is like he just had a talk with Penn State about this week about, you know, potentially taking 2 running backs and why they're recruiting other guys. And that was interesting. You know, he says he's fine with it. Where that lies in the middle, hard to say, right? I would expect him to tell the media that that's not an issue. But when I also look at the depth chart, the fact that they didn't really go after Brian Bonner in the 2026 class, and then I look at kind of all these young guys who would be taking over in 2026, to me it says, 1, there's a good chance that maybe 1 or 2 of the current guys would transfer out with time, and then 2, 2027 would be a good year to take 2 running backs. So yeah, that'll be a juggling game that Penn State has to figure
Fitz, is the depth chart to the point that it is kind of causing guys hesitation? And how much of that is, or is how much of that would you say is a change in perception? Because it seems like for the last 5 years or so, everyone's on board with the workload sharing that goes on at running back being a positive thing. And now the last 2 classes, we're having more of this conversation about maybe I want to be the only guy. So I guess how do you view that in terms of a short-term thing or kind of a developing trend?
Looking at the evolution of the cycle, like big picture type things. I think every running back that's in a 2 running back class right now originally wanted to be in a 1 running back class because that's how they thought it worked. This is July of 2025, and we're talking 2027 prospects here. All those guys will understand and realize that this is the game now. This is what you do. You kind of go out, and most classes are going to be 2 running back classes. For emphasis, I just ruined my thought process there. But you're looking at a situation that happens every year. I mean, Penn State's going to end up with one running back class. And I think part of that is having Spell in the next class and knowing how special he is. Like, you talk to people in that building about his potential, and it's like, I don't want to say Saquon, but I'm going to, tap around it and say this is a guy that's as close to that as we've had since then. And is he or isn't he? I don't know. Like, he's still got some time to develop, but he's really damn good. And I think that they understand that. And I think that went into sort of moving away from Brian Bonner after that official visit. We talk about keeping it a one running back class for Messiah Mickens, and I'm not sure that it's more about Keemon Spell. Like, because you take a second one in 2026, and then all of a sudden you look at that roster. It's got 7 scholarship running backs on it right now. 2 are leaving after this year. The portal is going to be a natural move, at some point for some of these guys, because you can't carry.
You can't play 7 guys at running back. Yeah,
and 2 of them are freshmen. Jabri Wallace-Coleman, I think, is probably a redshirt guy. Tyke Hayes might be on that line. Whereas if it's a typical year and there's 4-5 scholarship running backs, he might be playing as a true freshman. Okay, whatever. But at the same time, you've got those 2 guys coming back. So that just kind of overlogs your room, waterlogs that room. And it's going to open up a little bit after this year. But at the same time, it's still a lot of running backs. Like, you're taking 2 away next year if nobody leaves, which, who knows what's going to go on with that. But that's still a big number if you're just bringing in Messiah. So it's a rock rolling down a hill, really. Like, you're trying to stay out of that way and not get in, or basically not get in your own way with that. So I think that the decision to take 1 in 2026, yes, it helps with Mickens, who has flirted with other schools, etc., but did not take any other official visits. But it's also about Keemon Spell, and why take somebody right now if it's going to potentially cost you the guy that you think is the guy out of all of these guys potentially.
Yeah,
drink.
Great. I think that's a great point to end the running back conversation on. That's not the only guys that Penn State has committed. We mentioned Leighton Von Brandt, Khalil Taylor. Just as a quick recap, Ryan, can you remind us about Khalil Taylor?
Really good player out of Seton LaSalle. He's currently the 3rd ranked wide receiver in the entire country. I think that's going to end up being a little lower with time. Honestly, it's just, and it's not necessarily, that's not a knock on Khalil. It's just the wide receiver pool is so big. And that is always the case. Like, with Lex Cyrus, I forget exactly where he finished, but I remember having this conversation with Charles Power. That's like, if you're a top 30-ish receiver, it's like kind of like being a top 10, 15 player at most other positions, just because of how big that pool always is. Obviously, Khalil Taylor popped as a sophomore. He has doesn't he have an entire tape of just touchdowns or something like that? Like, it's pretty insane. The not kind of numbers and everything he did this past year. But Penn State was able to get him on board firmly early on, and he's another player that I think schools will come knocking for. He's been quiet lately. I believe he broke his, I want to say, collarbone, or had some sort of injury in 7-on-7. So his summer's been kind of slower, from just visits and things like that, which is great for Penn State. They're fine with that. And he was up on campus, I believe. No, never mind. He didn't make it this summer. I don't believe he did. But Khalil Taylor is going to be a heck of a player, one of the best in Pittsburgh, just right alongside Keemon Spell. I mean, those are absolutely the 2 guys right now that kind of popped the most to me in the Pittsburgh area. Jimmy Kalis is a good-looking offensive tackle too, who has a ton of offers at Pittsburgh Central Catholic. So, but absolutely, there's a reason that Von Brandt, Taylor, Spell, they're all top 50 prospects and really flirting on the line of being 5 stars. But we're also talking about, a class that has 17 months to go until they sign. And really, it'll be, I think, 18 months until those rankings are finalized after all American games and things like that. So let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But when you look at what they have, I mean, right now they have more top 50 players in this class than the 2026 class, which is kind of wild to think about.
Yeah. It's interesting that they got such a strong head start. And if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, Leighton Von Brandt, some of the things that he just shows on film, just as kind of a quick recap, and then we can move on to some of the guys that we want to talk about that aren't committed. A guy who is both aggressive and athletic. I think that's a great combination for Phil Troutwine. He's got length, athleticism as a pass blocker and as a run blocker. And this dude cares a lot. He is nasty as a run blocker. Sometimes I think that works against him, gets a little bit too heated, but also something that he, you just watching him working on, you'd rather, we have this conversation all the time, you'd rather dial that back than try to get that out of somebody. So a guy who's got a lot of building blocks for the class of 2027. as we talk about these guys progressing in the rankings, and just as a kind of a keep in mind sort of thing when it comes to an offensive lineman, guys are going to develop and get taller and be part of that conversation once their measurables match his as they are so early. And then, as Ryan mentioned, with those receivers, like Fitz, we always talk about this when you talk about the especially the big athletes, the offensive lineman, defensive lineman, you'd almost rather them grow late than early. I would say Von Brandt, though, is in that category of he's not too big too early. And I think that's the important side of the conversation there. But there will be other guys who match him in size at some point in these progression of the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big kid. Like, he's always been a bigger kid, and I think the thing there is he's not like weighing 310 pounds just to weigh 310 pounds. Like, he's building himself up. He's not. Kevin Brown ruined it for all of us, right? He was 240 pounds, and I was like, this guy's a 5-star, and you're like, or not you specifically, but you're like, but he's only 240 pounds. And now all of a sudden you look at him, it's like the natural progression of things happens. So Kevin Brown broke that curve for most people. So Leighton Von Brandt's working his way up there. And I think the big thing about Leighton Von Brandt is that when you grow early, you have a longer sort of, I don't say shelf life, but you have a longer opportunity to learn to walk in a straight line, basically.
Yeah.
I grew 8 inches in a year. Like, that was a tough 6 to 12 months after that to learn to basically walk in a straight line. And it's similar for a lot of these prospects where you might shoot up at 13, you might shoot up at 16, 17, something like that. So, but when you get comfortable with your body and you're able to move, that makes a big difference as well. So I think that's the thing that he's got going for him. I think, seeing him in camp, there's a long way to go there. Like, there's a long way for him from the physical side of things as a pass blocker, and like understanding where that's coming from. It's going to be a big step for him when he goes from Delaware to the next level. But I think he's got time to develop, and he's got time to understand that coordination, get his feet underneath of him, and I think he'll be fine in the long run.
Let's transition to another offensive lineman, a big deal specifically in the class of 2027, and that would be Maxwell Hiller of Coatesville. Announced his top 8, and it's a big top 8. It's an important cut because look at this list if you're watching here on the YouTube channel: Clemson, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama. Not just run-of-the-mill top 8. So a big moment for Penn State to be in that top 8. He's been to campus multiple times this offseason. But Ryan, can you just give us the general where we stand with Maxwell Hiller at this point in his recruitment?
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being, maybe Spell will be the top player in Pennsylvania, and if he would be the second. I mean, I do believe he's a potential 5-star talent, and the fact that he just went down to, I think it was, I know it was the Big Man Challenge at Future 50, and then I think he also did the Rivals 5-star challenge too, and walked away from both of those, like, really impressing 24/7 scouts, our scouts, everybody. So that's encouraging for his rankings perspective and things like that long term. But I've said it many times, Hiller has been someone circled to me for feels like 2 years now. I mean, Penn State offered him before he was even on the varsity squad. Oh, by the way, his brother is a freak of an athlete too, and a potential 5-star basketball player. So
Max himself has a LaSalle basketball offer.
Does he? Did not know that.
Yeah, I did not know that. It's impressive. Wow. I texted him and joked with him that they're just offering him to get to his brother, and that's a whole other thing. But anyway, yeah, it's impressive athlete there to go along with a guy that's pretty well built for this point in his high school career.
Yeah, look, back-to-back years we have Kevin Brown and Maxwell Hiller in Pennsylvania. Like, obviously you got Kevin Brown, you got to get Hiller. Like, these are two of the best offensive line prospects, well-rounded wise, in a long time. And I like Cooper Cousins obviously became a 5-star at the very end. I don't want to overlook Cooper Cousins, but they're different than like what Javen Brown was. Javen Brown was always like Javen Williams. Yeah, was always like a potential. He became a 5-star because he put up gaudy shot put numbers and massive, it can move well, but he never really was a pass blocker in those things, where Cooper Cousins was much more fundamentally sound. And these guys are right now kind of following those in those similar footsteps, I guess we'll say. So yeah, massively important player for Penn State. He's kind of grew up a Penn State fan, was up here all the time, was visited, who knows, he's visited a dozen times now, it feels like. I got to look at the profile to know for sure, but I would argue that he's the most important. Well, he's certainly Troutwine's most important recruit moving forward. I have no doubt about that. Especially with 2026 being kind of, there's not going to be a ton of options out there, or, maybe you'll have to flip somebody late. But to me, this is a must-land player. I know. I said it, Sean. 17 months to go. I know.
You are the worst.
I'll drink for that one.
Listen, I love it when Ryan will plant his flag and give us conviction.
He's that good, man.
I think it's great for the show. I think it's awesome, and I think it's good to kind of like, there are some tent poles that we can decide on.
If you think losing out on Grayson McHugh was a big deal, watch if he goes somewhere else. You want to see a blank storm. I won't say the bad word, but you get it.
Who are the other regional players we need to know, Fitz? Or respond to that. Sorry, if you had more to go there.
No. I mean, I don't call anyone a must get, but like, you look at the added emphasis that Penn State's put on that. I was standing there when sort of James Franklin had Kevin Brown come up and talk to him, and everything I say comes back to Kevin Brown today for some reason. I apologize to that, but I'm not going to apologize for that because he's really good. But he came up and started talking to Maxwell Hiller and talked about basically running your own race, having your own recruitment, having a situation that he went through where he visited Alabama and Georgia Brown. I'm talking about where he was like, okay, I know what I want, and I'm not wasting any more time on it. Is Hiller going to take that direction? If he does take that direction, I think it's wonderful for Penn State, because I think it's Penn State, Clemson, South Carolina's in there. I know he's got a great relationship with Maryland, but I don't see that one happening. But you're talking about a situation where, and I think it's kind of unfortunate right now from a Penn State perspective, where you want these guys to be on that path where they're going to essentially commit early. And we looked at Hiller as a potential early commit, and we got some feedback and they said, no, he's not in any rush. This is not going to happen anytime soon. And that was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. So you're looking at a situation where you need these guys to jump on board and build your class before the big money talks come in. And this is going to be a guy that's going to command something. Now, I will say this, Clemson is not going to go above and beyond. Like, they have a solid structured program, but they also operate really how Penn State operates, in that you're going to make what you make because of what you become at Clemson, because of what you become at Penn State. I think that is the big selling point. So when you're looking at his top 8, yes, there's a couple of schools in there that have thrown some money around, but at the same time, a lot of similar approaches among the NIL revenue sharing philosophies for these schools.
And then South Carolina, which is just always, I'm always surprised by them on one of these lists. Like, they must be excellent recruiters, because I of the list here, like, Maryland obviously has a regional tie to it. And then you got South Carolina, which doesn't have a regional tie. And I wouldn't say they have overwhelming success. I just always find them odd to be on these lists.
I assume he has family in South Carolina, like every single recruit I've ever covered.
Everyone from the Northeast now has family in the Carolinas. That's a fair point.
It has been a long time running joke, actually, that just like, oh, what do you like about South Carolina? I got family there. Okay, cool. Everyone's got family there. It's a well-known fact in the recruiting cycle. But yeah, I mean, that's he likes South Carolina. I think South Carolina's in the top half of their list. I will say that. Like, I think it's appealing to him to be down there. And I'm curious if that's a splitting votes situation with South Carolina and Clemson, or if it just won't matter at all.
So, Fitz, coming back to you, who are some of the other names that you've identified early? I know you wrote about this earlier, but like, any of the guys that you think just generally that are important to point out that you may have noticed, or that are just part of the
must-land players, Sean?
That's the best question.
Any of them? No, I've got a piece coming out today talking about actually offensive line recruiting and tight end recruiting, which I think there's a very interesting tight end stat in there that I'll get to in the story. But Penn State continues to look at guys like Olubabola, in North Jersey. Really, when you're looking at camp season, you're looking at offensive tackles. I texted you guys yesterday about this. Like, there was no better tackle in uncommitted tackle than Olu in June at Penn State. So I was encouraged by that. And I think he's probably remember that conversation we had about true tackles. He's 6'6" plus, got a wonderful wingspan, just a guy that you can continue to build up, and he looks a lot. I compared him, I think the first time I saw him in person at Under Armour T-Frag, I compared him to Drew Shelton in terms of a long and lean body type. But he's going to continue to be a guy that can add a ton of weight and can be really good. So I think if you're looking at, I think we may have him a little bit high, number 38 in the country. But at the same time, he's got traits that sort of prop him up there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to just shorten this down to O2. I've decided that he's now just Olu 2.0 or O2 because you did a much better job
squared.
Yeah, O squared. There we go. Ryan, anybody that you want to highlight here? Anybody else that you've talked to, or anybody else you think is important in the region?
There's a ton of guys. I mean, as far as wide receiver, Matthew Gregory, out of Pottstown, Owen J. Roberts put up crazy, numbers as far as 40s and 100 meters. He finished second in the 100 meter this year. Likely is, in a good position to win potential back-to-back 100 meter championships over the next couple of years. So, obviously very good looking wide receiver prospect. I thought he was pretty impressive at the Under Armour Baltimore camp earlier this year. Certainly has ways he can improve. I mean, without a doubt, speed is his thing right now. Route running and things like that can improve without a doubt. But he's still a rising junior, and this is his opportunity this year to do that. So, where does you had his profile up there, T? Like, what was he ranked? Like 50th or something in the country? He's another really highly ranked early guy. Whether he stays that high, time will tell. But if you could pair Matthew Gregory with Khalil Taylor as far as two really important or good-looking in-state prospects, I think that would be a massive win for Penn State's wide receiver. He's number 41, by the way.
41
wide receiver.
I was muted. Yeah, 41 in the On3, 36 ESPN, 73
On3, which I think we're supposed to now call the Rivals 300, but I'm just kind of waiting for them to merge those profiles because I get confused with it. But
on the website it says On3, so I'm just doing the reading. Yeah, Ron Burgundy reading the teleprompter. That's all I'm doing here.
Next week, Rivals 300. We're gonna make that adjustment.
All right. Go ahead. Okay, so there's a bunch of names we get to, but really the point that Fitz has been bringing up is the strategy for 2027. And I don't really have a fair way to ask you guys this particular situation, but what happened in 2026 feels like if it happens again in 2027 could be a massive problem of 2 years in a row.
Happened a bit in 2025 too. Sorry to cut you off, Frank. But this year was more extreme, but there were examples of it last year.
So that would be a 3-year trend, and that would be, for whatever it is, that is not a great way to go about things in recruiting. So what's the strategy for 2027? Is it the same strategy to get as many players on board before June, or is there some sort of way you would even predict, or you think Penn State should change the way that they're operating to make sure that doesn't happen to them in this next recruiting cycle, and they can keep some of their top prospects from just picking the highest number on the list or picking the highest number of the places they like? Fitz, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's always been the strategy, regardless of revenue sharing or not, to get guys in the boat as soon as they can, or quality guys in the boat as soon as they can and as soon as they're ready. I think the second part is the important part. As soon as they're ready might be another one of those sliding scales, because we saw the outcome of, and I don't think this is a situation for Joey O'Brien or maybe Kari Adams, but like guys that feel really, really good about Penn State, and Penn State wants them to go through the process. Well, maybe do you get a little bit tighter on that right now? Do you figure out if this is a situation where, okay, I think I'm ready to commit, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, are you 90% sure? Yeah, maybe we'll do that. I'll have that. That sounds nice. That's a situation where I'm looking at, because I think that Penn State has put itself in a position where they're at from a spending perspective and where they're at from a national hierarchy perspective is it's really tough to be 5 to 15 right now, because the guys ahead of you are going to outspend you, and the guys below you are going to nip and nip at your heels there. So it's a tough space to be in, and you're finding yourself defensive about it, really. Like playing defense against maybe guys that you don't even have, or maybe guys that aren't even in the boat yet. So I think that's one thing when I look at this cycle for Penn State is you saw a lot more trying to, and we say this in like the in-game threads and stuff like that, trying not to lose rather than, going over the top and playing to win. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
A lot of that is a structure, like philosophy type thing. But at the same time, some of it is like, pushing a little bit harder earlier, trying to get these guys in that you think are going to be elite prospects. I mean, Grayson McHugh, if Penn State is like, hey, let's get on this back in October, November, something like that. Ryan, we had that conversation. We put him in one of the original big boards, and he wasn't really on the radar at that time. Then all of a sudden he got on the radar, and everybody else noticed. And let's be honest, how many schools have come along and offered after Penn State has offered or been a presence in someone's recruitment? Penn State does a really good job evaluating. Penn State does a really good job identifying, and they're not getting as many of those guys because they flesh it out. And that's not just a Penn State thing. That's a prospect thing where why would you commit right now if you're a 2027 prospect when you have the opportunity to maximize your potential earnings? And that's what I do. You guys do, when we try and, leverage job opportunities or whatever. Not that that happens all that often, but like if we get a chance to do that, Ryan, you're up for an extension, right? Sorry, that's an inside joke. You're looking at a situation where you're trying to maximize, and if you're a 2027 prospect, why put yourself in that position unless you absolutely know what you want and you absolutely have that ability to get it?
Ryan, I wanted to follow up on something Fitz just said, because this is just an observation I had. I feel like the last couple of times I've been to camps and I've watched this process play out, especially 2 years ago, Penn State offered a lot more guys after camps, or there were a lot more public notifications of this guy gets an offer, because they've developed such a track record of developing or identifying talent early. Is there hesitancy to offer guys until you want them to commit? Do you think that there's a change there that you've observed?
I would say in the last, not including this year. Yeah, this year, not overall offers were down, but there's a couple things to look at. One, Penn State is incredibly aggressive at offering guys before most other schools. I haven't done the numbers for this year, but I think it was maybe 2 classes ago, they ranked 2nd or 3rd with the most offers to anybody in the country as far as, comparing all Power 4 schools. I'm sure they're right up there this year as well. So from that perspective, that has been a change that's been coming for a while. It's been 4, 5, 6 years since they've really kind of adapted that mindset. 2, it's kind of hard to point out with camps, T-Frank, because a lot of guys don't want to camp, and it's kind of sporadic. Like some years they're going to have the Jazeel Harts and the Braswell Thomases and a lot of those kind of guys that they've always liked and may have an offer publicly, but they got to go earn it and all those kind of things. And then some years it's just going to be more difficult to get guys. It's just kind of it's a gray area. It's not really black and white in my eyes, where they're going to do everything they can to get guys to camp, but just the way the calendars fall, and so many guys are doing OT7, 7-on-7s, traveling all over the country now. Like that's becoming a bigger thing than ever before. Although those are usually the more prominent elite guys than the guys trying to look for offers, to be fair. But I just think it's not. You can't look at this year and be like, oh, well, they're offering guys less. Like if they would have been able to get a ton of these players, throughout the region on campus, there may have been a lot more. It just kind of every summer's different, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Ryan, you make an interesting point that I'm going to rant on here, and the camp aspect of it. We're seeing so many offers and so many guys that have a bunch of check marks by their names not do that as 2027 prospects, even before their junior season, because they think they got it made. They think they're here. They think that check mark means something when it really doesn't until push comes to shove there. Now, there's a level of prospect that absolutely has that, but there's also a level of prospect that does not. And that level of prospect is much bigger than the ones that have that ability to do that. So I think that camping as 2027 prospects is a number one. I think it's a very good sign, a green flag, if you will, of this prospect wants to compete. This prospect wants to get better. And that's not saying that the other guys don't think they want to compete and think they get better, but they're not doing it. So I think that's a very interesting look. And how many times, Ryan, have we found ourselves looking for 40 times shuttle times sizes for 2027 prospects? And they used to be, you can go to camp because that's when you get discovered. That's when you get out there. And then all of a sudden it's not. And I always say, read my piece later, going specifically to the tight ends, because it's an eye-opening stat that is really fascinating about how all this stuff works. So just definitely that's my plug for that, T. Frank, as we get to the end of the show here. That's what I got coming up. And you don't have to ask me that question later. So
perfect.
But it's just, we're at a very interesting time in the cycle. We're at a very interesting time in a 3-year cycle, as Ryan mentioned, with the revenue sharing, with the NIL, with all that stuff, seemingly a little bit more regulated right now. I think it's an interesting subplot.
And we're 2 years away from like real regulation. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like we're still in this gray area where maybe things in actual 2027 or 2028, like by the end of this decade, I think we'll have everything but collective bargaining, if that makes sense. But we're still in this gray area where, I mean, USC, for example, right? I mean, they basically back paid their entire team to have crazy money to play with this. Like schools are still finding ways to be different. And I know that has nothing to do with the camp conversation we had, but that's where we're at.
I mean, the end goal is getting those players committed to your class, and it starts in a bunch of different places. So it is all tied together. I guess the last question I have then is the calendar, right? So the other aspect of this, of the recruiting and being with the prospects and evaluating them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen Penn State make some big moves. I believe Kevin Brown was in the late summer or early September, but not having, so to back up for a second, with the calendar changing and July being a full dead period and August being a full dead period heading into the season. And whenever you start the season is when you can then go back to recruiting. Is that a detriment to Penn State, given they want to be aggressive and get guys in the class? And we've seen some players commit in the late summer for the next cycle, or is this just going to shift that decision to September? Fitz, what do you think?
Yeah, they picked up Kevin Brown last year. They picked up Jasir Rogers last year. They picked up, I think, Keemon Spell was in that range last year. I'm just scrolling here and making sure that I've got it. Yeah, so like that is detrimental to how Penn State works, absolutely, but I don't think it's altering. Like,
I think if you ask Penn State staff, they're actually in favor of it, just because they want to be able to focus on their team right before preseason camp starts.
Sure. I think
that's why this change happened.
And it was a hindrance to do that and then go right into camp. And this is not like a vacation thing. That's more of a preparation thing, right? You got to be in a certain mindset to go to camp. And it's like, shit, I got to do this, this barbecue now, which it's been very fruitful for Penn State, but you got to work around it. And it was always like an outlier, like time in the calendar, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, it used to be when that all was open. And I can remember, so my son's birthday is July 15th. And I actually went from the hospital and stopped by the camp on my way to run an errand or something like that. And it was that's how it was the entire summer. And then they cut it down to 1 week. Before it was, you can get guys on campus throughout that time. Now, and then when it went to 1 week, it's like Thunderdome in there trying to get your people to your campus. So that's why it became forward focused. And I think that
and not only that, remember
about it. What's that?
August used to be open too for guys could come up. And now obviously players were practicing for high schools, but like they actually used to be August used to not be a dead period too. So it's a major change to 6, 7, 8 years ago, whatever it may have been.
Right.
But I think most coaches, I know all coaches are more in favor of it than not. Where it hurts is the Roseby Lubintus situation, right? Because normally you'd have a chance now. You have 2 weeks to try and chip away at, like I said, some guy committed to NC State a while back. Like to me, I was going to bring this name up earlier. Like Bryce Gilmore, for example, was an offensive tackle Penn State was in a very good situation with. He ends up going to Arkansas, commits, and never really made it up here for his official visit. Like that's the kind of guy you could chip away at maybe and get a guy up here for a visit like that. Or more likely than Bryce would be, chipping away at some of those guys who, they're film pop and we never got numbers on XYZ, get them up there for those camps. And then that's where you snowball it into, they come back for the whiteout game, you flip them during the season. So that's where, not having an opportunity to host a camp or two here late or the Lash Bash, whatever it may have been, that's where it kind of hurts. Because once you get in that season mode, man, like players don't really want to deal with recruiting, especially if you're a senior. Like they kind of want to be focused on their senior season. A lot of them are trying to enroll early, so they're doing extra classes, whatever it may be. And then coaches don't either. Like they want to. I mean, especially Penn State, expectations are as high as they've been in since '99 almost this year, right? So they want to focus on kicking ass this season and making sure the expectations are met. So it's a big kind of balancing act there that I know coaches would prefer to not have on their plate, which is why in the end, I think it's going to be pretty slow 2026 for a while until the coaching carousel gets going. And then that's where you can see some moves, but it all depends on who, what, where they at, what other schools are they considering? Has there been any contact with Penn State prior? I feel like we're going to be in a 3-month period here where it's going to be pretty slow. And then maybe once we get to October, maybe early November, that's when, maybe this guy's popping up or this guy, we'll see. But Oregon too, because of how big that game is, I wouldn't be shocked if we saw somebody.
Yeah, that is an excellent roadmap for what's coming up this fall. And I hope that we've done a good job of preparing that for you here at the end of the show, because these things change and they evolve. And I think that nobody gives a better context to what's going on than these guys. And Fitz, You obviously
I'm not done yet. Yep.
Yeah.
One more. Ryan makes a great point about the thing that we don't think about with the summer period going away. You look back to 2023 and Yazid Haynes decommits, Josh Miller decommits,
Yep.
TJ Parker, as neither here nor there, even though that's whatever.
He's
but the guy that I'm looking at is Marcus Stokes. We remember him, right? Quarterback. Anybody?
Yep.
No.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
That guy.
That guy.
So he decommits in the summer, in the dead period, actually. And then all of a sudden you've got to scramble and get quarterbacks here. And that's how Penn State ended up with Jackson Smolik. Like that's, he came.
That was a win.
After what's that?
That was a win. Yeah. It worked out for Penn State in the end.
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, Jackson Smolik, whether he's 2 or 3, yes, it is indeed a win. But that's the situation that you're looking at right now. So basically not only was it an opportunity to, be forward focused and think about prospects in another class, but also it was a good time for cleanup. You could figure out some things and maybe turn around and make some things work. So I think that is the part that we will probably overlook. Is it going to be a huge change? I don't think so, but at the same time, it's still a change that everyone's going to have to deal with.
And also everybody's on the same boat, right?
Correct.
It's not like Michigan's going to have holes to fill, even Ohio State, it's going to happen with everybody. So it's a problem that all these coaches will have to figure out. One of 1,000 that they have, and are all hoping that someday we get a recruiting calendar that everybody agrees on, which at least 70%.
That's not going to happen. Come on.
No, probably not.
I will say, I agree with what you said, Ryan, that this change of eliminating that week in July actually allows you to keep the main thing, which is winning a college football championship, which is the whole point of recruiting. That's the whole point of doing
on the field. Forgot about that.
Football on the field.
Penn State's coaches just went on vacation for 2.5 weeks. Whatever. I think for the most part, most of them are back now, and it's all about the season now. And now the recruiting staff goes on vacation on the back end, where you have this kind of, it used to just be a 2-week dead period. Now it's prolonged. But my point with all that is the coaches get all this vacation out early after crazy June. And from this point forward, that's what they have to primarily focus on. And that's what they want, especially when you have a season like this where, big things are expected.
This is Ryan pitching 2 football shows a week and no recruiting shows, so he can go to the beach and just chill. So that's the underlying for those that like the Dakota Ring. That's
we're working on some of that. We're working on a little bit of that here behind the scenes. Not that we're going to eliminate the recruiting show because, by the way, this is sponsored, so we're not doing that for sure. But also, it's great. Like today was awesome. You guys were so good on today's show. I normally say that off air, but this was I was thoroughly entertained the entire time. By the way, cleaning things up from previously, a Rothrock Wood project, they're going to be on Fairmont Ave. So I just wanted to give anyone who's coming up to Arts Fest. Also, I hate forgetting things. I just hate forgetting things and not following up on it. So just wanted to throw that in here at the end of the show. If you're going to be coming up for Arts Fest, maybe I'll see you there. I'll be walking around, checking out. Art's one of my favorite things. So enjoy the weekend, you guys.
Fests are one of my favorite things, so it's perfect. Yeah,
actually, you're right. It's the fest part of it that is. There's a lot of those. There's a wing fest. There's an arts fest. There's a music fest. There's all the fests here in State College. Which it's a place to come have a party.
Valley Brew Fest.
Happy Valley Brew Fest. It's just a place to come have a party. So come on, hang out. We'll see you then. That'll do it for me. I'm going to stop rambling. We'll talk to you next week.